I love food. I'm sure it's noticeable, right? Me and food have a deep relationship. Deep like the fibrous root hairs extracting nutrients from the soil, embedding in them to the plant to give me nourishment kind of deep. I like to plant it, prepare it, eat it, and talk about it. Heck, even my degree is in talking about food. But one thing that breaks my heart is the disconnect that the Black community has with the very industry that sustains us, agriculture. My love of food goes all the way back to my paternal great-grandfather, Milas Moser. Milas was the product of his slave mother and his white owner father. Born in slavery, after emancipation, my great-grandfather was given land by his white siblings. He then took that land and bestowed it upon his own children so that they could grow their own families, one of which was my Papa Harold. My Papa Harold was able to use that land and leverage it to get even more land to be able to grow his own family. Unfortunately, my Papa Harold passed away in 1986, but my grandma Eliza stewarded his land for many years. I remember going to her house in Taylorsville, North Carolina, and walking in the door and smelling flowers cut from her own garden, the sweet smell of tobacco because she packed snuff, and always something delicious in the oven, like a blackberry cobbler, or better yet, persimmon bread made with persimmons that she foraged and picked with her own hands. Behind her house was a smokehouse, and then my personal favorite, the greenhouse. I was always so in awe of my grandma Eliza and this woman who had a room devoted to fancy hats and gloves was also the same woman who would put on jeans, a t-shirt, throw a scarf on her head, and was on her knees working in the ground. I think that was when I fell in love. Around the time I was about 10 years old, she developed Alzheimer's, and that was also about the time that my parents decided to dig a garden in our backyard on the south side of Columbus. I remember coming home from school, going in the backyard, picking a zucchini, slicing it, sautéing it, and making it for my after-school snack. The power to be able to grow and prepare my own food at that age made me feel like I had superpowers. A few years later, on a trip to Ghana, West Africa with my Auntie Malika, I remember that we visited a cocoa farm. And there was the cocoa beans being processed to turn them into chocolate. And something that struck me so hard was the fact that the people who were working in that garden and on that farm were unable to afford the end product, a simple chocolate bar. The relationship was broken. And that's when my Auntie Malika reminded me, he who feeds you controls you. So that's when I made the decision to pursue my degree in agricultural communications and economic and social development. I told you I had a degree in talking about food. And I was so excited after graduation to be able to land a job at a local settlement house and their award-winning garden working for their summer teen employment program. I was so excited to share with those kids my love of food. And what I noticed was that the kids, as they came into that garden, they thought of it as slave work. I was appalled that someone would think that something that I loved so much was slave work. So I vowed to be able to teach those kids to fall in love with food the same way that I did. So the following year, I worked with the teacher, and we developed a curriculum. I wanted to show these kids how their world connected with food, everything from food to fiber to fuel within agriculture. And teaching these kids that this wasn't slave work, that this was the work that made our ancestors resilient. This work was done centuries preceding our enslavement. This was the work of growing okra and sorghum and rice and, yes, even cotton. And with this knowledge, those kids came back year over year. And I was onto something, and I realized we need to switch the narrative. And if we can teach these kids that he who feeds us controls us, we need to switch that narrative into thinking and reminding ourselves of our rightful place as the masters of this work. The agricultural industry is a more than $1 trillion industry in the United States. Of that, there are about 2.2 million farms. Of those 2.2 million farms, only 5% are minority owned. Of that, 2% are Black owned. Now we know that Black ownership has a lot to do with land ownership, but that's a different TED Talk for a different day. But when I realized this, I thought of a saying from a friend of mine named Javier Sanchez. He says, "I don't want a piece of the pie, I want the recipe." And the recipe is agricultural education. Where do kids spend most of their waking hours but in school? Heck, the school year was predicated on the agricultural calendar. So where best to sow the seed to be able to connect our youth to food, to fiber, and to fuel, and understanding their food system than in the science curriculum, and then utilizing those school grounds to be able to have learning gardens. Where best can we connect Black and brown students to become and to know about the George Washington Carvers, who developed amazing sustainable agriculture systems, as well as developing more than 200 products with peanuts? Or teaching them how to be profitable, like Booker T. Watley, who is the father of the oh-so-loved community-supported agriculture program. My kids loved the work that they did. The ownership of the land and the knowledge that they learned and instilled in their peers and younger students was invaluable. Some of them even fell in love too, going on to pursue careers in food service and in landscaping. But without a mere introduction into the education and understanding how their world connects and grows, they won't have that ability to fall in love. And so I ask that we petition our school districts, especially our urban school districts, to be able to connect those students through the science classroom. And if you're like me and you're teaching at home, start saving food scraps and using them to grow your own soil with composting. Or if you're an educator, being able to show your students the power of growing their own only takes one single seed. I told you, I love food. I love how it brings people together. And when I think about having faith the size of a mustard seed, I feel that. Because I have that same faith that when you grow and instill a seed of agricultural education into our Black and brown students, connecting them so that they know where their food comes from, how it's grown, how to sell it for a profit, that those students will take that knowledge to be able to grow thriving food systems to sustain our communities and for our future. Because we all got to eat, right?